Ultra running can be pretty expensive, but can it be done on a budget? Well, I've tried to make it as budget as possible by going through just a few things that are very often on mandatory kit lists. Kicking off with number one, a good pair of shoes. A pair of shoes that you've tried, you've tested, you like, are comfortable for 20, 30 mile efforts. Try out your shoes. This is a pair of Hoka Speed Goats from when I was training then. I still wear them now. They've still got tread. I also wore a pair of Nike Zagamas. Make sure you're buying your trainers well before and testing them well before, because you just don't know how your feet will react to wearing a shoe for 20 hours plus. It's very likely your feet will swell, so possibly a shoe that's got a nice big toe box is going to be important, or maybe you've got two pairs of shoes, one that's more narrow and then one that allows you to spread a bit more towards the end of the race. Shoes are completely dependent on the person. I know people who can only wear certain pairs of shoes, and I know for me wearing a pair of Nikes was great for some of the harder ground, but actually the more terrain, I wanted a bit more grip. Something like this was perfect for me. But shoes, rule number one, your feet are going to be your best friend. And talking your feet, the next thing is one of these. Most things will say have a first aid pack. Now, if there's any rubbing or anything, have your blister plasters and things in here and get them on as soon as you notice that rubbing. I obviously had some significant blisters over the years doing different stuff, but actually as long as you stay on top of your feet, any hot spots or anything, you take care of them, you should be fine. So having one of these whilst you're between sections and aid stations is an absolute must. These are pretty cheap. You can put one of these together for maybe £20 with blister plasters and bits and pieces. Have one of these, very helpful. Something you're also going to need to buy is a head torch. So here I've got a silver head torch. It worked really well for me. Silver's kind of, I would say, a happy medium. I found this on a very good discount price. I think it was about £50. It comes like this with the battery pack just here on the back, but you also get an additional charging thing. And so it's batteries and charging. It's good because you won't necessarily need your backup head torch. Lots of races will want you to have a backup head torch, but if you've got one, a better one, so let's say it's not a £20 one that lots of people will buy, you buy a £50 one that does both, the likelihood is you're not going to have to swap around head torches, you're not going to have to resize it in the dark, and it should last you throughout the night. Now, a couple of things that will be mandatory. One of these things, basically an emergency blanket, keep you warm if anything goes wrong. And then most probably, you're not going to be able to see it very well, some sort of raincoat with a different millimeter of thickness. I think this was like 10,000 millimeters. It's basically the amount of time that it can keep you dry for, essentially. But a good raincoat that is runnable in is important. Going to places which aren't necessarily like the big name brands for running rain jackets and things, but also just like more mainstream things, you're going to save a bit of money there. So Regatta will do you fine. 5,000, 10,000 mil is probably what they'll want for the race. So hydration bottles. Now, I think I had with me 3 or 4 on the day. I've got this one here just because it's got a nice long spout for you to look at. But these are really important to have, and they do definitely break. I broke 2 of them actually during the 100-mile ultra that I did. So having 2 spares was really, really helpful. I have, you can see here, that's that brand. We all know that brand. I don't even know how to pronounce it, whatever, but it's that brand which does basically the cheap version of all the proper versions. And to be honest, it's fine. This worked totally fine. Again, I'll put this all down in the description. As with all of this stuff, it's on a budget. So if you have more money, spend more money because it will last. Let's go on to something that I think we shouldn't be skimping on. And that's gonna be your hydration vest. Why should you not skimp on one of these? Well, if it breaks, you're gonna be in trouble basically, and one of these won't. It's super robust, super comfortable to wear. It fits everything you need. Bottles in the front, extra storage on the side, extra storage on the back. You could put a water bladder in there if you wanted to. Don't skimp on one of these. Just be patient and try and find a decent deal. But this is my favorite bit of kit and is still going absolutely strong. There's no problem. I don't see upgrading. I'll be upgrading with this at any point. So one of these will do you just fine. And do not find the cheapest ones possible. They will do things, they'll look good. The cheap ones will look good. And then you'll see the pockets on the front. So like here, where you can see the water bottles would go, you'll find out that actually it can only fit like a 200 ml bottle. So pay a little bit more and it will be worth it. Okay, next thing, a hat. This is like the world's floppiest hat. Any hat will do, something just to keep the sun off you if you need it. The other thing I couldn't find is like one of those, I don't know what you call them, like a rag, basically a rag, those things that you can tie around your head, tie around your neck and make really wet. Same thing, if it's really hot, you can get one of these, cover it in water, stick it on your head, jobs are good and you're gonna be cool for a while. Then on the other end of the spectrum, and obviously I didn't take this many, but dry bags, so there's tons of different ones in here. You can literally get like 10 bags for £20 or something on Amazon, super cheap. They're all the same, they do the same job. All you want these for is keeping maybe chargers, electronics dry, raincoats pre-dry, spare clothes dry and things like that. You can just slip the smaller ones of these, anything inside them, tuck them in the bag, nutrition, all those bits and pieces. And we'll be doing nutrition in another video, of course. Get some of these. Honestly, if it's raining or anything, you will be really thankful that you kept your stuff dry. Particularly important, these, if you're doing things unsupported, uncrewed, because it just stores everything. You can label these, it keeps everything in check. Get yourself some dry bags and they will pay themselves off very quickly, if that makes sense. I would say this is the one particularly expensive side, but actually it's not that expensive now when you look at how much shoes and stuff are, is a watch. Here I've got a Chorus Apex watch. I bought this a few months beforehand. Why did I buy one of these? Well, the reality is that if you're going to buy a Garmin or something like that to track your running, unless you're willing to spend £400, and it's probably, maybe I'm exaggerating and I need to look at the market more, unless you're willing to spend £400 on a Garmin or something, the likelihood is it won't have some of the features you want for ultra running. The reason this watch is so good, the reason this Chorus Apex watch is so good is that I got it for probably £160, maybe £200 between there. It lasted me the entire race whilst I was doing GPS tracking and breadcrumbing, and I think it's breadcrumbing. For those of you who don't know what that is, basically it means that I was able to follow a map that I downloaded of the course for the entire time, and it was updating the entire time. I had a Garmin before that. It simply did not have the battery life. I was running maybe for 4 or 6 hours and I was getting back and it was saying 10% battery. This did 30 hours of constant on time. Around that, I had like 35% left battery. That is incredible. And because it does the GPS. Does it have music? Does it have all those fancy bits and pieces? No, but you don't need that for your run. What you need is a watch that's going to direct you to where you're going, even though lots of the time there will be marked well, so you don't need it at the end of the day. It's super, super helpful. Really good for training, lasts forever, does all the simple things well. I can't recommend one of these watches enough. There's tons of new variants and models and bits and pieces. But for having the basics, for having what you need, this will do you very well. The most expensive thing you'll probably buy if you're going to be doing more ultras. From my experience, people tended to give up, quit because of discomfort and pain. Maybe it was an actual injury or maybe it was severe blisters. I saw some people with pretty horrific blisters. Now, there was 2 ways I believe I got around that. One was I taped my feet. I taped my feet well and I practiced taping my feet beforehand. Taped up all of my toes, taped up the particular hot spots on my feet. I didn't use this particular tape. I used to use more like an adhesive type of tape and then just wrapped it around. I didn't change that the entire race. I did have blisters, but they weren't unmanageable. They were fine and they recovered very quickly. I didn't lose any toenails or anything like that. So taping your feet, in my opinion, is hugely valuable and will save you and save your feet, because basically messed up feet will lead to a messed up race. Anyway, I've given you a lowdown of some bits and pieces and different bits of equipment that will probably be on a mandatory list. Now, there is tons and tons of stuff out there. We could talk about shorts all day and t-shirts all day. In my personal opinion, those are things you've got to find out for yourself whilst you're training. You've got to try out different bits of equipment and it can be really expensive. I think even some of the stuff I've said there are not necessary. I don't think you need a really good watch. I don't think you need certain branded stuff. However, the reality is that with ultra running and marathon running, you often get what you pay for. So if you go cheaper, it probably won't last as long. If you go more expensive, it's probably just going to be better. The reality is for ultra running that you will be very miserable if your equipment and your bits and pieces go wrong early on in the race. It isn't quite the same as a marathon, because with a marathon, it's 4 hours of suffering. With an ultra marathon, it can be 20 to 30 hours of suffering, if not more. And so if bits and pieces go wrong, it will be a struggle. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is what it is. What the aim of this video is to do is basically to bring down that barrier to entry. It can be very expensive to start, but in reality, what you need is to hit the mandatory list, good pair of shoes, good nutrition, which we'll cover in the next video, and a willingness to push through it. So I hope you enjoyed that, and those are just my bits and pieces that got me over the line and are the absolute basics.